Wait. Where am I? Wait. Why is there a camera crew? Oh, it's a video intro. Yeah, we're not doing that. I smell gin. Why, hello there. Wait. No! No, not like this! Ah! Somebody help me! Ah! 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 Oh God, where's it taking me? It's got me! Where are we? I didn't sign a contract. Ah! Ah! God, let me go! Finally. What the hell even was that? Oh, really? I wash up in Detroit? How likely is that? Who the hell even writes this? Huh. I suppose it's technically Dearborn, isn't it? I guess I'll get on with it. Anyway, what you're looking at here is Ford's River Rouge assembly plant. During the Second World War, it was one of many production complexes across the manufacturing powerhouse known as America, further enabling its ability to crush the fascist scum that threatened democracy. America would produce many vehicles during this conflict, but this would be one of many production lines for one of the most famous, the Willys MB, or in this case, the Ford GPW. For simplification, I'll be doing what everyone else did and continues to do, and just call it the Jeep. Oh, and no, it's not an acronym, but that's a whole different story. Because, though remarkable and numerous, this video isn't about the Jeep. Instead, allow me to direct your attention to the Ford GPA Seep. As you may have already put together from the dumb nickname, the slightly boatier appearance, this is a Jeep that goes in the water. Now, I've briefly mentioned this abomination in a previous video. In order to spare you, I didn't go into it much and stayed mostly on topic. Unfortunately, it happens to be especially relevant to the topic for this video. Also, I'm not feeling merciful today. Anyway, looking a bit like a street-legal paddle boat, the Seep sports a vicious 60 horsepower engine that I'll let past Chet say it. It's certainly not a bad idea. You can get a command vehicle, scout car, or mischievous band of sappers across a body of water, even if it crosses at a whole 5.5 miles per hour. The speed in the water isn't exactly important if the enemy is far more focused on more obvious crossing points, like bridges, or even narrow and/or shallow sections of a river. It really does just have to be okay at best at the whole boat part, as long as it's a reliable car on the other side. Many nations saw the benefit of a light amphibious vehicle during the war. Obviously, the Americans with their Ford GPA, the Russians with their Gaz-46, oops, that's still a Ford GPA. There. The Russians with their Gaz-46, or Mali Automobil Vodoplavauchi. And the deliberately attractive Schwimmwagen, derived from the German Kugelwagen, among others. Obviously, we're only focusing on one in this video. Nope, not that one, that's still a Gaz-46. Confusing, I know. There, that's the one. The Ford GPA. So, if you're anything like me and the many other soldiers that share my opinion, one look at the floating flivver and you wouldn't trust it to cross anything more than a shallow stream. And that's a similar opinion that a select group of Aussie troops had as they watched one drive by, likely struggling somewhere near New Delhi. That is, all but one. And who else but Ben Carlin? an Australian man, an officer in the Indian Army. He is one of the stars of our show here. And the conversation went something like this, more or less. Now, before we continue, I must warn you, I'm going to attempt to use the general Australian dialect of the English language. Please stand back. You don't like it? Looks fucking bonza to me. Nah, mate. I wouldn't trust that fucking cross the Murray if it dried up. Well, I reckon with a bit of titivation, you could go around the world in one of those things. You're off, you rocker. Though this is a completely believable conversation between a few Australians, only this line was actually a direct quote. With a bit of titivation, you could go around the world in one of those things. That first part is very important for the latter. Ben knew that the Seep wouldn't be able to make such a treacherous journey, and he, an engineer, would spend years wondering what it would take to make it possible. And in that time, he would marry a lovely woman named Eleanor, his second wife actually, an American nurse in the Red Cross, and they would move to Maryland in the United States, where they lived a normal life. That is, until he saw this bad boy at an auction. The words, "You could go around the world in one of those things," echoed through his heart. Now, relevant to this, there are three things that separate our dreams and us making them a reality: possibility, opportunity, and action. Ben spent years wondering if it was possible. He had a good idea of what it would take, and the opportunity was staring him down. All he had to do was take action, and just over $900 later, he left that auction with his prize. However, circumnavigating the globe wasn't the only daunting task ahead of him. He couldn't do it alone. And something so perilous wouldn't exactly be Eleanor's first idea of a honeymoon. I guess she's into it. Huh. I guess sometimes all you have to do is ask. Oh. Hey, Mrs. Magnum, can we get a tank? Anyway, before the newly acquired Seep is ready for the journey, there's a lot of modifications the couple need to make. And these modifications wouldn't be cheap. Then there's the funding for the journey itself. Luckily for the Carlins, there's one company that will do just about anything for the slightest PR victory. And sometimes all you have to do is ask, right? Hey there, do you have a moment to... Hey, wait, get back here, why are you running? Well, looks like we're going in on it alone. And by we, I mean them. Modifications and all. Well, technically that's not true. They did get sponsors, but it's just hard to tell exactly when. Anyway, alright, first off, see the front here? That and the length of the craft in general will get eaten alive by the open ocean. Extending the length and giving it an actual bow will greatly increase its seaworthiness. Speaking of, it's definitely going to need an actual rudder, not that tiny little thing. Also, it's going to need an enclosed cabin and a bed. Oh, and we're going to need to do something about the range, too. The standard fuel load of this thing won't get us very far. Fuck it, give it a drop tank, too. To top it all off, it's going to need some navigation instruments and a massive radio set. Man, these modifications must have been expensive. But, over the course of 18 months, they made it happen. Now, with their Super Seep, trademark pending, the brave couple are ready to set off on the adventure of a lifetime. That is, after they picked a name. Out of all of the possibilities, they would settle with inspiration from an advertisement for Arid deodorant. Don't be half safe, use Arid to be sure. Buy Arid today. Yeah, they called it the half safe. A bit of charm to it, to be honest. Anyway, after a few trials, on January 16th, 1948, they embark from New York City. And off they went. It's gonna be a long journey to make landfall in the Azores. A whole 2,500 miles. What? We lost radio contact? Oh, they're back. 40 miles south of where they started. Oh boy, something broke with the steering gear. Yeah, that would be a problem. That issue addressed, they set off again a few weeks later, and they're back. They nearly asphyxiated due to a crack in their exhaust? Yeah, that would be a problem. Alright, third time's the charm. Seasickness. Are you fuck? Alright, fourth try. They once again launched from New York, this time with a wealth of knowledge from their previous attempts. In fact, in a week, they've already made it over 200 miles and lost radio contact. Wait, what? Well, good. They got picked up by a Norwegian tanker and towed to Halifax. After this, they would end up basing out of Montreal and made additional modifications. Alright, July 19th, 1950, the day history was made. The Carlins set off from Halifax in the half-safe. Nothing will stop the treacherous two, I hope. What do you mean they lost radio contact? Nah, they actually make it this time. He'll be alright. Anyway, it was a long trip, but the half-safe and her crew safely arrive on the shore of the Azores. Ben only needed to fix it a few times, had to borrow fuel, and it more or less limped ashore with about half an engine. But it did make it. Now, after some sightseeing, the shore of Portugal was supposed to be next on their list, but the Carlins opted to go for Morocco instead, due to the safety net of islands along the way. And I get it. As long as they spent at sea on the way here, I would prefer to avoid the ocean at all costs. Compared to the trek across the Atlantic, the trip to the Canary Islands, and finally Morocco, was largely uneventful. You know, other than the hurricane. That aside, getting to Europe will have its own challenges. Specifically, it's friggin' hot. On the drive through the Sahara, due to the metal enclosed top, the cabin of the half-safe reached 77 degrees during the day. Celsius. So, naturally, they preferred to drive at night, so they didn't die. On April 22nd, wrapping up their venture through northern Africa, they crossed over to Gibraltar. Afterwards, they went on a tour of Europe for a few months. And it was largely uneventful. Like, actually, nothing really happened. They did run out of money, though. Months of traveling Europe will do that. But there was one last stop on their tour, England, which they reached by crossing from Dunkirk on New Year's Day of 1952. This stop was rather important for their journey. Not only did they desperately need to raise money, the couple needed to rest. And the Seep, their loyal steed, it needs some repairs. Hurricane Charlie kicked the shit out of it. To the point where they were actually prepared to abandon it due to the structure starting to fail. In the hurricane. Yeah, they would have died. Anyway, lucky for the Carlins, Ben had an old war buddy in England who was able to help them with the repairs. Group Captain Bunting of the RAF. As for raising funds, they knew that newspapers around the world had been telling their story, but most people who read it had no clue what the craft, looked like. With that came the great idea to work with local stores. The shops get to display the vehicle for a few days, drawing in a crowd of curious onlookers that may consider buying something. And the Carlins get a little bit off the top for the publicity it brings the store. Oh, that's the motor car, isn't it? Too right, too right. Well, I'm already at the grocer's. I dare say I might as well procure a tin of beans whilst I'm here, what? Or something like that. Everyone kind of wins with that idea. Additionally, Ben also published a book detailing his trek across the Atlantic. And the repairs? Going slow, but well. This whole R&R thing went on for a few years. But that's just what the Carlins needed, not to mention the half-safe. And they would set off crossing the channel in April of 1955. The next phase of their journey would have them head south, through Europe, and cross into the Middle East. Much like northern Africa, they had to travel at night for most of their journey. And the roads, where present, weren't exactly kind. Between the heat and the terrain, the GBA needed repairs and maintenance often. In fact, Ben would go on to mention during an interview later on that they actually preferred the Atlantic. In addition to the terrain, the Carlins were also stopped often by local authorities throughout the Middle East. And though they weren't met with crowds of people like they were in Europe whenever they stopped, there was a good chance that a stop for repairs was met with a few locals poking and prodding at the vehicle, usually accompanied with a barrage of comments and questions directed at the Carlins, and usually not in English. Months of traveling out of the way, on July 15th, the crew would finally make it to India. This leg of the journey would come to a close as they entered the city of Calcutta. They would spend a few months there, due to the monsoon season, when it would dawn on them once more. They needed money. So, they put the half-safe on a ship, let me finish, and went to Australia, let me finish, in order to return to Calcutta to continue the journey once they have raised the necessary funds. It still counts. Whoa! They pimped the seep out to a bunch of department stores again. Come on, you like that part. They also raised some money from the book sales and a few donations. Oh, and Ben got to see his family. That's just nice. Alright, so the road so far is already one hell of a honeymoon. The journey isn't even close to over, and the couple have already been through more than most experience in a lifetime together. And, on a ship back to Calcutta, Ben will have to cross the rest of Asia and brave the Pacific. Wait, where's Eleanor? Oh. Damn. Anyway, Ben made it to Calcutta in February of 1956, where he would continue the voyage alone. That is, until he met some guy in Burma, likely in a bar, a fellow Aussie and Perth local named Barry Hanley. You're crossing the Pacific in that fucking My, that sounds right, Bonza. Or something like that. Now you might be wondering, Chet, who is that? And I would respond with something along the lines of, funny story about that actually. That's Barry Hanley, the stuntman from Ireland. You see, as I was doing research for this part of the video, it became very difficult to look up anything about Barry Hanley without getting Barry Hanley. Also, I could only find one photo of the Barry Hanley that's actually relevant to this story, so here he is, Barry Hanley. Anyway, Ben and the new guy are learning a very important lesson. The mountainous jungles of Burma and Thailand are much easier to navigate when you avoid them entirely. Out at sea. A feat that definitely didn't have Ben and Barry restlessly maintaining the half-safe and her engine out in the open and blisteringly hot South China Sea. Eventually, the pair would make it to Hong Kong, and then one hop to Taiwan and later Okinawa. They would make it to the shores of Japan in July of the same year. Kagoshima, to be specific. While they were there, they would realize that the GPA needed extensive repairs, which works out because it's not exactly a good time to cross the Pacific right now. Typhoon season is not something you want to play with. Repairs, upgrades, and further fundraising would push the continuation of the journey off to early 1957. By then, Ben and Boyer will be... Wait. Boyer? Where the hell is Barry? Huh. So I guess Barry went home. No matter. Boyer Lafayette de Manty tagged in, and he happens to be a journalist too. Anyway, the half-safe and the recently updated crew roster were underway in May. The pair drove up the mainland of Japan and started towards Hokkaido. And while en route, they did hit some rocks, causing the craft to spring a leak, which Ben handled pretty well. Regardless, they reached the northern end of the island on June 12th. Afterwards, they would continue north, heading up the chain of Pacific Islands, reaching the Kamchatka Peninsula in July. All that remains of the Pacific is to brave the ice-cold Bering Sea and the string of islands off Alaska, and they would finally reach Anchorage on September 3rd. Once there, De Monti would end up flying home to Arizona. He would later mention Ben's irascible character during the voyage across the Pacific. Ben, however, Ben's pretty down. He lost friends, the love of his life, and spent years fighting for a dream that could come crashing down at any moment. But that journey was almost over, and the hardest parts were behind him, along with the rest of the world. And that journey, though treacherous, was a challenge to overcome. The road ahead, however, was just that, a road. No mountains to overcome, no jungles, no deserts, and most importantly, no oceans. Compared to what lies ahead, the last few years must have felt like climbing Mount Everest. Any mountain after that is just a hill. And with that, Ben came to realize that pursuing his dream against those odds, more or less, was a high. And it doesn't matter how high you get. It's the same old air when you come back down. A bit sad and overly philosophical, I know, but there's an uplifting possibility. Now, don't quote me on this. I don't know for certain because I can only find one source that even mentions this, but apparently he was being dragged from party to party during his stay in Anchorage.
Like an angel and dressed like crazy.
And thankfully for Ben, he was pulled out of his depression, but the job was not yet done. He waved goodbye to his new friends in Anchorage and made his way southward in November. The trip onward was largely uneventful, other than one thing. A bridge over the Peace River in British Columbia ended up collapsing while Ben was on his way south. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but there were many travelers that couldn't cross the river until they were in the front of the queue for the ferry. You know, other than that one guy. Honestly, after everything he's been through, having no other choice but to make a 600-meter river crossing because a bridge went out would be the funniest thing ever. The last true obstacle of the voyage, and the Seep, you know, the car that can be a boat whenever it wants, just so happens to be perfectly suited for it. All the pride in the world probably would have just barely fit in that little cabin of that mighty car. And that pride would carry him through Vancouver and then Seattle. On December 7th, he would arrive in Los Angeles, where he would stay for a few months giving lectures and stuff. But the job wasn't truly finished until he made his way to Montreal, and on May 13th, 1958, he finally arrived in the city designated as the starting point of the journey. He did it. He finally did what most assumed was impossible. A feat like this and a vehicle like that, as far as everyone was aware, should have been failure at best, death at worst. But he did it. Granted, not alone. It's just a shame that nobody showed up to the finish line and people had a hard time believing him afterwards. Regardless, the half-safe clocked at 50,000 miles, crossed 38 countries, and sailed in 3 oceans. All that over the course of about 10 years. Yeah, the half-safe and her crew have been through a lot. And though this is where the story ends, it's also where the story of the rest of their lives begins. Ben and Eleanor would not get married again. Eleanor would live in New York, and she would live a long life until 1996. Ben would eventually return to Australia. He would end up publishing another book, The Other Half of Half Safe. Clever name, by the way. And then he would get married one more time. He would also have a divorce one more time. Totaling 3 divorces in his life before it came to an end in March of 1981. He would leave behind a single child, a daughter named Deirdre. Boya, that journalist that Ben picked up, would live his life in Arizona as well as frequent trips to Japan, writing numerous books until his death in 2017. As for Barry, I don't see any record of him being dead, so I have no choice but to assume that he hasn't left that bar in Perth since we last saw him. Really living his best life. As for the star of our show, the half-safe, it eventually went on one last voyage, being shipped across the world to Guildford Grammar School in Perth, Ben's alma mater, where it's still proudly displayed to this day. And that is the end of the voyage of the half-safe. Huh. Which also happens to be the title of this video. Well, I guess this is good. Hey! Whoa! Wait! Hey there! Just a couple things before we wrap up here. I wouldn't worry about him. I'm sure he's fine. Hello? Oh, and I'm very sorry about all the jump cuts. I usually try to avoid them, but I am genuinely incapable of not stumbling every sentence. First, I'm sorry for how long this video took to get out. On top of a lot of personal life stuff, the script was a pain. I had numerous sources for this, and there are many times where they were either in conflict with one another, or just omitted information entirely. For example, I was trying to figure out how long they stayed in England, and I noticed a few reports mentioning that they had to repair the damage from the hurricane while they were there. Oh, okay. What hurricane? There are also a few other times where I'm dead certain that they were making shit up. Like I mentioned when I flashed text on screen that one time. I may have stumbled on some Ben Carlin fanfic. I don't know. So I apologize if I got anything wrong. Please let me know in the comments below. I will do my best to pin them. That being said, if this story was interesting to you at all, please look into it. There's actually a lot of stuff that I had to leave out. For instance, while they were in India, Ben had the marvelous idea to try to sell rights to the story to 2 separate publishers. It didn't go well for him. That's actually why they had to go to Australia. As for the second thing that I wanted to mention, I plan on continuing the Battle Damage series, and I definitely plan on finishing the Great Interwar Fever Dream series. but there's one other video that I want to do next, and it's very important to me. With that in mind, I'm going to be away from the office for a bit. A year, actually. There's two things that this will affect. First, the mic quality. I'm not going to be able to bring my setup with me, though I did procure a damn good USB microphone, so we'll see how that works out for us. Second, my upload schedule. I don't know how it's going to be affected. It could be better, it could be worse. We'll cross that bridge while it's burning. Anyway, I've rambled long enough. Thank you for your time, and thank you for watching this video. I'll see you next time.